Hi, everybody. I think we're ready to get started. So I have a PowerPoint presentation, but before I pull that up, I'll just start by introducing myself and some of the other people here that are here to help talk about name changes and gender marker changes. So my name is Sarah Baum. I am an attorney and I am the director of Student Legal Services. My pronouns are she, her, and also on the Zoom is Lindsay Ditto, who is the other attorney in Student Legal Services. And then we also have an alum, David Perez. David, do you want to introduce yourself or just say a little bit about yourself?
Well, I don't know what to say besides I graduated in 2022. I am 24. I am a social worker and I use he, him, his pronouns.
Thank you so much for being here. So David agreed to share his experience with the name and gender marker change process. So let me go ahead and get started. I might be looking both at the screen and there's a video camera in the room. So if anyone has questions, I think we'll have time at the end for questions, but maybe hold your questions until the end, but we'll try to pay attention to any questions that come up in the chat. Okay. Oops, I'm gonna have to share my screen. I'm hoping just like, I'm just gonna make sure I share my screen properly. Okay. All right. And everyone should be able to see PowerPoint. So jump right in. So I'm gonna start with just telling you about the agenda for today. So I'm gonna tell you a little bit more about student legal services, and then I'll talk about today's objective, and then we'll jump into how to change your name legally, and then what to do when you need to update your documents. I'll give you some takeaways and then share some additional resources. So about student legal services. So student legal services helps currently enrolled students with legal issues. So we are available to give students advice, limited representation, and referrals. And a lot of people ask me, what kind of legal issues do students have? And, we see a lot of housing issues, a lot of immigration issues, people who have been given a traffic ticket or an arrest for a misdemeanor. We help people with money issues and debt, employment questions. And of course, we are available to help people with name and gender marker changes. Our services are confidential. So even though Lindsay and I work out of the Dean of Students office, but we don't share information outside of student legal services unless a student wants us to share information outside of our office. And the service is at no additional cost to students. So today's really about information and education. So guiding you on how to legally change your name in Illinois, and then explaining how to change your name and gender marker on identifying documents. And I can provide some resources. One thing I do want to make clear though is that this is not legal advice. So if you have questions particular to your own situation, then it's a good idea to talk to a lawyer about your own specific situation. So we really wanted today familiarize you with the process and direct you to resources The other thing you should know is that the laws in this area vary from state to state. So today we're really focusing on Illinois and specifically Cook County and Chicago. And we're also focusing today on adult name changes. So the process for changing the name of a minor is different than the process for changing the name of an adult. All right. So how to change your name? I'm first talking about reasons to change your name. So really in Illinois, you can change your name for any reason, as long as it's not fraudulent. So like the concern is people might change their name to avoid their creditors or to get out of criminal charges. But most people who want to change their name are doing so for one of the reasons I listed: people getting married, divorced. They are using a name that more closely matches their gender identity. Some people just don't like their current name. Some people want to make a political statement. When I was preparing for this, I was looking on the notices of upcoming name changes, and someone was trying to change their name to Medicare for All. And so that obviously sounded like maybe a political statement. And you're allowed to do that. You can change your name for religious reasons, to avoid an abuser. So, so really you don't have to have any particular reason, as long as it's not to commit fraud. And really in Illinois, there aren't many rules on what you can change your name to. So, a judge might consider whether or not your request to change your name, like you're doing it voluntarily, but there aren't a ton of limits on what you can do. And then this question: do you need to go to court to change your name? So you don't need to go to court to change your name if you've gotten married and your name was changed via the marriage certificate. Or sometimes people get divorced, and as part of the divorce judgment are given permission to return to the use of their previous name. But basically everyone else has to go to court to request a legal name change. Of course, you can start using a different name, but if you want to legally change your name in Illinois, it's a court process. I should mention that there is no court process for changing your gender marker in Illinois. So we're going to start by talking about, if you want to change your name, how to go about doing that, and then we'll talk about gender marker changes. So the threshold question is, can you change your name in Illinois? You have to be at least 18 years old to file a request to change your name, and you have to have lived in Illinois for at least 6 months. And you're also going to want to file your request in the county in which you live. There is currently a criminal history bar to name changes. So basically right now you cannot change your name if you have been convicted of a felony, unless it has been 10 years since you completed your sentence, or if you've been convicted of felony or misdemeanor identity theft, criminal sexual abuse of a victim under 18, sexual exploitation of a child, indecent solicitation of a child or adult, or any other offense that requires you to register as a sex offender. So there are 2 exceptions to this. So if you were convicted of a crime and your conviction was pardoned, or if you have certain class 4 felony cannabis convictions, you may be able to change your name. But otherwise, these are the limits on changing your name. And my advice would be that if you have a criminal history or if you have pending criminal charges, that would be a good time to consult with a lawyer about whether or not you're going to be able to change your name or not. Whoops. Let's skip this step. There is some news, though. There is a new law that will be effective January 1st, 2024. It was called the Name Change Modernization Bill, and it makes name changes easier in Illinois. For one thing, it removes that 10-year waiting period for felony convictions. It also removes the lifetime ban for people with identity theft convictions. And then for people that are required to register as sex offenders or on the arsonist or murder and violent offender against youth act. So if you're required to register under one of these laws, a judge can still give you permission to change your name if it's due to your gender-related identity, a marriage, or religion, or your status as a human trafficking survivor. So a lot of advocates said, why should people have to wait 10 years if they have been convicted of a felony, or if one of these other criminal history bars applies, like what is the reason for that? And so the law updates this to make people make it easier for people to change their names. It also gets some of the technical aspects of the law are being updated. So I'm happy to come back next year and revise this presentation, but just know that if you're filing your case in 2024, it will be somewhat easier.
So
I should say that yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I don't know if this is still the case, but when I changed my name in 2018, I could file, because at the time I was living in Chicago, and I could file for a petition in Chicago. But when it came to changing my birth certificate and all that, I actually had to go back to where I was born, which is Waukegan, Illinois. And I had to go through the circuit courts over there. So even though I was living in Chicago and I filed out here and it got approved out here, I still had to go back to where I was from to kind of legally do everything else.
Did you have to go to court out there, or do you just mean like dealing with the Office of Vital Records?
So when I did my petition, I did all of that in Chicago, but when it came to the amending a birth record by court order and all that kind of stuff, I had to go to circuit court in Waukegan.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to talk about how to update documents. I don't know that it should be required now to go back to court. But that's one thing I was going to share with people, is that this is an area, many areas of the law are like this, but things are always changing. And sometimes like you'll talk to someone at court who will tell you one thing, and you talk to someone else and they tell you another thing. So this whole process does require a certain amount of like patience. And I might go through my whole presentation and then their experience differs in some way. So that's one reason I want to share that we're available to help. If you are told you have to do something, we can help you figure out if you really do or not. Because yeah, I haven't heard that you might have to go back to court after getting your name change order. It has been, I think, 5 years or so since you changed your name. So I think a few things have changed, partly because of COVID. But that's helpful to hear that you had to go twice to court. I have not heard that 3 times. So, okay, yeah. So again, there are efforts being made to make this process easier. So hopefully, even by next year, things will be slightly simpler. So the basic steps for filing a case like this is, number one, prepare your documents that you're going to need. And I'm going to tell you what you need to prepare. File your documents, and then publish your name change if required, and then attend your court date. One thing I want to share is that the Transformative Justice Law Project of Illinois has done a lot of educating of judges in Cook County. And so what I've been told is that the judges in Cook County are really great on this issue, and when people come before them to change their names. And I think, David, that might have, I know you might share your experience of going in front of a judge. I think that judges have been educated a little bit more since you went. Do you want to share a little bit about what your experience was like?
Sure. So when I went the first time to court, I was super nervous. My judge was a older, I assume, cisgender white man. and he was very uneducated, and I had to do a lot of explaining and telling him basically my life story for him to basically tell me to come back. So it was just a lot, and I had to go to court 3 times. And yeah, I don't want to get too deep into it, but it was a lot.
Yeah. So hopefully people going now will encounter judges who, are used to hearing from people who are changing their name to match their gender identity and, won't, will be more educated. At least that's what I've been told. Of course, it's hard to promise that you'll get a judge who is well educated, but I'm hoping that since you went, that it's a little bit more streamlined. So this is kind of what the basic steps are. My next slide. So the reality is it's a little bit more, that first part's supposed to show it's a little bit more chaotic than just step 1, 2, 3, 4. And partly that's because there's a lot of if this, then that in this process. So again, the upshot is to just try to be patient. The hardest part is probably figuring out what you need to file and actually getting stuff filed with the court. But again, we're here to help you with that part of it. So the first step is, again, to prepare your required court forms. So these are 3 forms that are required of everyone. This cover sheet is actually something that's only required in Cook County. So if you're filing in another county, you don't need that. But I have a link for the blank form that you need and some tips there for how to fill it out. A lot of the things I'm going to talk about today are filling out paperwork. And so it's, it can get quite boring, but I tried to err on the side of including all the information you would need in these slides. And I think we'll be able to share these slides with people who registered. So, the form is listed as plaintiff versus defendant. And on that, you would list your current name under, or your current legal name under plaintiff or petitioner, and then your new name under defendant or respondent. And check the box for petition to name change. So that cover sheet is just telling the court what type of case this is. And then for people who are representing themselves, the term, the non-legalese term is self-represented litigant, but you'll hear pro se. So if you're representing yourself, the term you might hear is that you're pro se. And so on forms, you can check a box saying that you're pro se, and there's this attorney number that applies. They call it an attorney number, but it's 99500. So you fill out that cover sheet, and then you fill out your request for a name change. This is also sometimes called a petition. And basically what it is telling the court what you're asking for. So it's giving the court information they need to decide whether or not you can change your name. On that request, you also have to have a person who knows you witnessed the form. They just have to sign it. They can be related to you. They do need to be over 18. But they're basically attesting that you're using the. And then I have a link there for the blank form. And then this is another weird thing in Cook County. You have to prepare the court order that the judge is going to sign. So you kind of fill out part of it and then leave part of it blank. And that's the form that the judge uses to grant or deny your petition. So again, I have a link to that form there. And then you need to gather your required documents. So you will need to file in Cook County, you'll need to file your birth certificate, which can be from any state. If you cannot get your birth certificate, you can use a copy of your passport. And then you also need to file your Illinois state ID. And the purpose of that is so that the judge can see that you've been a resident of Illinois. If you don't have an Illinois state ID, you can use some other proof of your residency, and that could be something like a lease or utility bill that shows your address is in Illinois. By the way, those 2 documents, the law doesn't require people to file them, but here in Cook County, the judges require people to file them. So, so get those ready to file in your case. And also, if you've changed your name before, you'll want any past name change orders. You'll need to file those in the case as well. Oops. There's an optional form that you might want to fill out, and that's a fee waiver application. So the cost to file name change applications, they vary county by county. Here in Chicago, in Cook County, it's $388. Again, this is something that sometimes the fees change, and even like reading, you'll see people cite different numbers. So I would expect $388 to $400. For people that are low income, you can apply to have that fee waived. Fee waivers are usually granted if you make under $25,000 a year. If you're not sure whether you qualify, you can fill out an application for a fee waiver, and a judge can decide whether to grant it or not. And a judge can even decide to grant it partially. So if you feel like you can't afford the cost of filing this, you can fill out this fee waiver, and I have a link to the forms and instructions. You'll fill out an application that basically says what your income is, your expenses, your assets, and it can be helpful to include with that petition a copy of any proof of income, like pay stubs, W-2s, bank statements, or any proof that you get government benefits. So if you think you'll need to file that, prepare those documents as well. And another optional document is a motion to waive notice and publication. So this is something that's sort of unique to name change applications, and that's that you have to tell the public that you're asking to change it. The idea behind this, I think, originally was that there was this fear that people might be changing their name to avoid their creditors or to hide from the law. And so it feels sort of antiquated for sure, but you have to publish your notice of name change in a newspaper for 3 weeks. And you can ask to waive this requirement if you think publication would put you at risk of physical harm or discrimination. And I've been told that the judges in Cook County have been pretty liberal these days in granting these. So it's probably worth filing a motion asking to waive that requirement. And I have links there to the motion and then the order that you would need to prepare. So once you, oh, sorry, I did want to, I put this note in here. Basically, if you are a victim of domestic violence, stalking, or sexual assault, you are a member of your household, you do not have to put your address on the report. You can use an alternate address. The purpose of putting an address is typically so that you get notice of things, but if you don't want to, if you would be afraid to disclose your address, you don't have to list your address on the report. Okay, so once you get all your documents kind of prepared, then you'll need to file your request with court. And it used to be, and David, I think you probably went to the Daily Center, but you know, now everything gets filed online. And the way to do that is that you have to register for this program called Odyssey e-file. There are other programs you can use, but that's one that's free. And I have a link to instructions for how to file things online. One thing you do need to know is that all your documents must be in PDF format. So some of the documents you'll find are fillable PDFs. And just a little pro tip is you might need to like compress your documents, or you know, if you can't like file them if they're in that fillable format, you might have to, I don't know the technical terms, but if you have trouble filing, don't fear, like you can fix mistakes. So don't be intimidated by this process. Like I will say that Odyssey e-filing is a little bit funky. But again, you're not going to screw anything up majorly during this part of the process. So first, you're going to take your cover sheet and your request for the name change, put it into one PDF and file that. And then if you're asking to have the fees waived, you'll file that as well. If you're not asking to have the fees waived, you'll pay the fee when you file this. In fact, they ask you to put in a credit card if you're planning to pay the fee. What happens after you file this is then you wait for a response and a court date. So the clerk of court will either accept or reject your filing. You should get an email saying whether your filing was accepted or rejected. If you don't get an email, you can check your Odyssey account to see whether or not your filing was accepted or not. If your filing is rejected, you can correct any errors and refile. So again, I recently had someone trying to file something and she tried to file it in that fillable PDF and it got sent back. So she just changed the format and resubmitted it. But if your filing is accepted, then the documents will be stamped with a case number, and you should receive an email with your court date, your court time. Court in Cook County is still taking place on Zoom. So you should get your Zoom room and the name of the judge you've been assigned to. And the court date will be around 8 weeks from the time you file. If you don't hear back within about a week, you can email the county clerk to ask about it and to ask about your court date. And then you should also hear back within a couple of weeks about whether your fee waiver application was granted or denied. And if it was denied, you'll be asked to pay the fee. So after your filing is accepted, you can file the additional documentation we talked about. That's when you would go in, file your proposed order for the name change, your birth certificate, and your state ID, and any past name change orders. And then if you're asking to waive the notice and publication, you can file that motion. If you filed that motion asking to waive notice and publication, your next step is going to be to schedule a hearing on the motion. The clerk of court thinks or says that you should be able to schedule your own hearing in Odyssey e-file. But I've been told that you really can't do that. So the clerk might say you can ask for your court date online, but then you go to do it and there's no way to do it. So what you can do is call this phone number. That's the name change clerk. And you can ask for a court date, time, and Zoom information to have your motion heard. So once you file your motion, you get your court date on your motion, then you appear at that hearing. And again, this is just the hearing to ask the court to waive that requirement that you publish your notice of name change in the newspaper. And what you'll do is appear at that hearing and you'll tell the judge why you believe that you are at risk of harm or discrimination if you publish your name change request. And you should also tell the court if you currently have or have previously been granted a protective order. So if you are a protected person in an order of protection or a stopping no contact order or pursuant to someone's bail conditions, the judge will assume that you shouldn't have to publish your notice. But otherwise, explain why you are afraid to file the notice in the newspaper. And it's not enough to just say, I'm going through a gender transition. That can be part of it, but you want to be a little bit more specific about your own particular circumstances. And sometimes you might be saying things that are pretty sensitive to your, and you will be on a Zoom room with other people. So court is a public forum and there might be other people waiting to have their cases heard. And if you think that what you have to share is very private and sensitive, you can ask the judge to speak last. And the judges, again, have been educated on why people might want a little bit more privacy. It's not going to be 100% private, but you can ask to go last. If you want the judge to hear from other people, you can have those people come as witnesses. So if you have someone who can say, you know, this is how this person might be fined if they are required to publish this, you can bring a witness. You don't have to have witnesses, but if you did want someone to talk, they could come to that court date. If the judge grants a motion, if they say, yeah, I agree, you shouldn't have to publish notice, they might just go ahead and grant your name change right then and there instead of making you come back, which would be great. If they deny your motion, then you will need to publish information. I'm going to talk about that next. But I might stop here. Does anyone have questions about that process going through the motion to waive the publication requirement? Yeah.
Talk about all this involved with this meeting, outside of Illinois.
That's a good question. So the question, if those of you online couldn't hear, is what if you're trying to change documents outside of Illinois? And so it is a court order. So the example might be, I live in Illinois, so I got my name change order in Illinois, but I have a driver's license from another state. I think yes, most states, every state's kind of different. And I have a link to a guide that does like state by state. One issue that might come up though is that some states, if you want to change your gender marker, require a court order. And in Illinois, you can't get a court order changing your gender marker. That it just isn't, there's no statute allowing for that. So you might have to go to that state to get a court order. But generally, I think the answer is yes, but it is a little bit state by state. Okay, so for some people, your case might be done at this point, but if you go and the judge says, no, you have to publish notice, you know, then what you'll need to do is fill out this document called a publication notice of court date. And it's basically just, it's literally that, a notice telling people this is the date and time. It's also weird, this form, because it asks for like the location of the court. And even though it's on Zoom, you need to put in like the physical address. And then you can take that to a newspaper, which will publish your notice. And just a couple rules about this: the newspaper has to be in the county where you live, and you must publish the notice once a week for 3 consecutive weeks. And the notice must appear in a newspaper for the first time at least 6 weeks before your court date. So if you file a motion asking to waive this publication and the judge denies it, you might need to push out your court date on your name change to give you enough time to publish this notice. And the other thing to know is that newspapers might charge a publication fee. I should say they will charge a publication fee. So you might say, what is this all about? Like, who reads newspapers? Like, what is this and what am I supposed to do next? The 2 places that people generally publish are the Chicago Daily Law Bulletin and the Daily Herald. So the Chicago Daily Law Bulletin, I have links there for where you can go, and they make it pretty easy. There's actually a specific page for name changes. Also, if you were granted a fee waiver, if the court said you don't have to pay fees, the Chicago Daily Law Bulletin will charge you a fee. Otherwise, it does cost somewhere between $150 and $200 to publish in the Chicago Daily Law Bulletin. So a less expensive option is the Daily Herald. And people have been successful in publishing in the Daily Herald. I think you just need to email. Again, you'll send them, what you send the newspaper is that form that you will have filled out, the notice, and a copy of the petition, and then they'll take care of publishing it. And then what you'll get back is called a certificate of publication. That's proof that you published the notice. So the newspaper, you'll need to find out from the newspaper how you'll get that. They'll either email it to you or mail it to you, or you can pick it up. but you'll need to make sure that it gets filed in the case because the judge is going to look to make sure that you publish the required notice and that you met all those rules regarding the timeline once a week for 3 weeks. So you'll need to file this, and this is what it looks like. This is a copy from the Daily Herald. It might be hard to read, but it's a certificate of public notice, certificate of publication that you can file in the case. David, I know you did go through publication, so I wanted to give you a chance to jump in if you wanted to share anything about your experience with that or.
So I did mine. I was just looking through all my documents. I did mine through the Chicago Law Bulletin, and it wasn't really an issue. I was nervous because at the time I was thinking, oh my goodness, everyone's gonna know about it, blah, blah, blah. Everyone's gonna blow up my phone. Nobody did that at all. And I don't think when I did mine, it was 3 weeks. I think it was a month. And that's why I was more concerned about everybody knowing and people finding out and all that kind of stuff. But they mailed me my certificate thingy majig. And yeah, it wasn't a hard process.
Okay, yeah, thanks for mentioning that. The thing about the Chicago Daily Law Bulletin is people don't read that. I mean, lawyers might look at it, but yeah, and the Daily Herald, again, I mean, I guess newspapers have gone like out of style in some ways, which is really sad, but for this kind of thing, you really don't have to worry too much that people are going to see it. So thanks for mentioning that. Okay, so you've filed everything you need, you've published your notice, so then the last step should be attending your court date. Again, this is currently taking place on Zoom. You'll want to have copies of everything you filed sort of handy. And what you can expect is you may be placed under oath and the judge will ask you questions. So make sure to listen to the questions and answer them truthfully. And basically the judge is going to understand why you want to make this change, how long you've been using this name. I saw a tip on somewhere that said you don't have to prove your transness, or you don't have to, the judge isn't trying to, you don't have to like prove yourself. The judge just wants to know why you want to make this change. So be prepared to explain. You're allowed to have notes, so you can jot down ahead of time if you're nervous, like some bullet points, especially if there's important dates, like when I started using this name, or anything else that might be relevant. The hearings are going to be short, like no more than 15 minutes. And at that point, the judge will either grant or deny your request, and they're going to write that decision in the court order that you filed, and then that should be emailed to you. If you're not in Cook County, you might have to go in person. So it's going to be pretty similar. You'll just want to have physical copies of everything that you filed, bring a copy of your birth certificate and your ID. And when you get to court, you'll need to check in with the judge's clerk to let them know you're there, and then wait for your case to be called. And again, on Zoom, it's, there might be other cases, so you do just need to like listen out for when your case is called. And Davi, do you, I know you said, you talked about how your first judge was like, I don't know about this, come back. But then when you actually had your hearing, I remember you saying you had a better experience.
Yes. So my first judge, he was really old and just not educated. And I had to basically tell him my entire life story. And he was very hard and just didn't care, in my opinion. And he basically told me to come back. And then my second judge was someone of color, and it was a lady, and she was really nice. And she didn't really question anything. She asked me a few things just to, I guess, help her understand why I was trying to change my name. But she didn't pry or ask me a zillion questions. She was really nice and I was honest. And she could tell that I was nervous because I'd never been in court. Well, I have, but I haven't been in court in that type of way in a while. So she knew I was nervous and kept affirming me that it was going to be okay and that I wasn't in trouble or anything. And the last time I went to court was to go to circuit court, and that was kind of the end all be all. And even then, I was still nervous because I didn't know if I had to do it again or if they were going to tell me, unfortunately, XYZ. But rest assured, everything was changed. And the only thing that was kind of a hassle was having to go to circuit court back in Waukegan, which is kind of an hour-ish away from Chicago. So that was a hassle. But when it came to my social security card, my debit cards, my bank stuff, my cell phone bill, all that, it was really easy. And all they needed was just the petition that had the stamp on it and some letters that I had from Howard Brown to change my gender marker. But other than that, it was kind of a long process, but not too long. But it wasn't that hard.
Yeah. So once you get that court order, I think then things kind of flow from there. One thing you should know, oh, I have this little slide just about the old reality versus the new reality. So just a note about Zoom court. I think it does make court more accessible to a lot of people. But still try to remember that it's an official proceeding. So if you're able to find a quiet place for your hearing so that you can listen. I've been in Zoom court where people are like literally at work and like, doing other things. And again, it does make it more accessible, but if you are able to be in a quiet place where you can listen out, definitely do that. Once you get that court order granting your name change, then the next thing you need to do is get certified copies, and that's just like an official copy. So you'll get like an email and you can print out a copy, but in order to change a lot of those documents, they want a certified copy, which is basically stamped by the clerk. And you actually will have to go to, in Chicago, it's the Daily Center. If you're in another district in Cook County, you can go to the local courthouse. But you can go and get those certified copies. And the advice is to get at least 3 copies. I would try to get like 5 or just as many as they'll give you. There is a cost I would bring your own copies if you can, and then it's $6 to certify. If you need them to print it out, it's around $8. If you were granted a fee waiver, you shouldn't have to pay for those certified copies. I put this little slide in. I stole this from another guide, but take time to celebrate. Like, this is a big deal. This is a huge part of the court process. I don't know why you had to go back to court, but that process should be over at this point. So take time to just celebrate that you did this. And then you have to get back to the nitty-gritty boring stuff, which is the rest of the presentation is really about updating your documents. So I won't, you will probably need to refer to a guide because to update each document is its own process. This is the same thing if you get married and change your name, or again, get divorced and have to go through and change your name on different things. The main documents that you can update are your Illinois driver's license or state ID, Illinois birth certificate, Illinois marriage certificate. And again, I'm saying Illinois because I'm going to talk about the process in this state. But if you have a court order from Illinois, you know, hopefully can use that in another state. But again, that's going to depend state by state. And then your federal documents include your social security card, your passport. I'm going to mention a few other things that you might need to change. Again, changing your gender marker is kind of state by state. In Illinois, you don't need a name change. So this can be 2 separate processes. You know, you might change one or the other. If you're changing both, you can do it at the same time, but you don't need a name change order in Illinois to change your gender marker. Same thing on federal documents, but some other states might require that name change order or a gender marker change in a court order in order to update your documents. So for the Illinois driver's license or state ID, it's $5 to correct the license, $10 to correct the state ID. What you need is just your current ID, your name change order, that certified copy. There's a gender designation form. And if you don't have a current Illinois ID, there's other documentation. I have a link to information on what you can bring. You can take all that to the DMV. Currently, you only can choose between M or F for male or female, but they will be adding X in 2024. So stay tuned for that update. That's going to be true on all Illinois documents. For your birth certificate in Illinois, it's $15. For that, you need $15 check, a photocopy of your ID, that certified copy of the name change. And then they have a form, the Declaration of Gender Transition or Intersex Condition, which needs to be signed by a healthcare or licensed mental health provider. That's to change your gender marker. Then if you're also changing your name, you need the notarized affidavit and correction of certificate request. So wait to sign that document until it's notarized. You have to appear before a notary public, and the notary has to watch you sign it. So gather all that information and mail it to the Illinois Department of Public Health, Department of Vital Records. And for that, the gender marker options are M, F, and N for non-binary. You can update a marriage certificate if that applies to you for $5. There's a form and you submit your photo ID. I think the recommendation is really to start with your ID because then a lot of stuff flows from that. Like some things require you to submit your IDs. So that would probably be the best thing to change first. To change your social security card, the cost is free. They have a correction form, which can be found at your local social security branch. A name change order is required, and then a letter from a physician stating that you've taken appropriate clinical steps to transition. And so there's a link to a sample order or a sample letter that you can give to your doctor to sign. And for Social Security, you have the option of M, F, or X. For passports, so the cost and documents you need kind of depend on your situation, if you already have a passport or if you're applying for one for the first time. But you will need proof of your US citizenship, proof of your identity, photograph, your certified name change order. You don't need medical documentation for this document. And you can take that to a passport acceptance facility. Right now, the options are M, F, or X if you're requesting a passport with routine service. If you need expedited service, or if you, the passport office processes other types of documents. Right now, those won't be available with X until later this year. And then some other documents that you might need to update, your voter registration, your naturalization forms, if that applies to you, your bank account, your COVID vaccination cards. Later in the slides, I have a link to a comprehensive guide that has more information about each of these things and what you need for each of these other types of documents. It might be a process, although, David, I know you mentioned that I think you said it didn't take you that long to do all of these. You can kind of do them simultaneously.
Yes, so I did everything simultaneously and I was looking at my documents and there was an option to do your name change and gender marker at the same time, which I did, and I had to do the declaration. Well, I don't know if they still call it that, but at the time I had wrote on the paper, this is the declaration, this is what you're gonna get notarized, and this is the affidavit. And I was very, very keen to trying to move everything along as quick as possible because I was in college at the time and I also wanted to change all my college records, and some of the things they needed actual court documentation to change. And yeah, it took a few months, but once I had all the court official stuff, that's when things were moving pretty quickly.
Okay. So yeah, things to remember, you can do this without a lawyer. Reasons to consult with a lawyer if you have criminal convictions or pending criminal charges, or if you're not a US citizen, there's nothing keeping non-citizens from changing their name, but you might want to just consult with an attorney, particularly if you have an immigration case pending. It might make sense to wait until that's done. Nothing in the law prevents undocumented people from changing their name, but again, it's probably best to consult with an attorney in that situation. File where you have your current proof of residency. One thing, this kind of speaks to what David was talking about. If if your driver's license has the address of your parents in outside of Cook County, you might need to file there because the judge is going to look at where your residency is. You can fix filing mistakes, so don't panic if your court papers get sent back. It takes about 2 to 4 months. It can be up to $600. That's on the high end. Again, a lot of these fees can be waived if you can't afford them. And then for resources, there's actually a lot of really good resources, which is great. But I want to say, don't feel like you have to read every single one of these because it will get repetitive. But I just wanted to include as much as possible. So the Transformative Justice Law Project has a really great page on name change resources. They have how-to guides, they have links to the blank documents. What they have that's really nice is examples of completed documents. So you can see how someone else might fill it out. They have some notes on things to think about. They also have an example that includes all of the name change paperwork. And they also have this a guide for e-filing. This is a really good e-filing guide because it's really specific to filing a name change petition. So e-filing, it's not that hard, but it can be a little tricky, or you might just get to a point where you're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to answer here. And this guide is really good. The Transmasculine Alliance Chicago has a really short, nice, easy to follow guide if your preference is something that's a little bit more basic. I would say that one's not quite as in depth. And then the Illinois courts have standardized court forms. These forms are general. These are the forms you will use to file. So if you just want to go straight to the source, the forms, and just fill them out, then you can go straight to the Illinois court standardized court forms. And they have instructions and forms both for the name change and for the fee waiver, if you're applying for a fee waiver. There's also guided interviews. So the forms should be mostly straightforward and easy to fill out, but if you prefer, there's 2 different programs. They're going to be pretty similar where you can go on and it'll be like a guided interview. Like it'll literally say, what's your name? What's your date of birth? What's the name you want to change to? And then it'll spit out the forms. One guided form is on Illinois Legal Aid Online. Odyssey Guide and File also has one that will actually help you e-file. It's free to use. I think that one's relatively new and it sounds really great. I don't know much about how well it works. I would say try that Odyssey one since it both guides you through the forms and helps you file. But again, it's a little bit of a preference if you prefer just to fill out the forms or have an interview, a guided interview. I sometimes prefer just to see the form and fill it out. But you might prefer to just be asked some questions and then the form will come out at the end. For updating your identity documents, again, the TJLP has some really great guides. That first one, the comprehensive guide, that's really good. And I think their commitment is to update that document because things change so often that it's hard to update things everywhere. So on their website, they say, we're gonna keep this one up to date. So I would look there. And then there's just some other links. Again, you don't have to read through every single thing, but you might find a guide you like better than, one better than the other. And TJLP also has sample forms that you can take a look at how someone who's been through this has filled these out. And then if you do need a legal referral, these are some places that do handle these cases, represent people in court. Transformative Justice Law Project. They actually don't represent people in court. They'll walk you through the process. There's currently a really long wait list. Other places that do handle these cases include Legal Counsel for Health Justice and Chicago House, which both have income guidelines. And then the Illinois Justice Court Helpline they just help people with sort of the logistics, like filing, sort of information about appearing in court. And then of course you can come talk to Student Legal Services. So I wanted to include all the resources in case you, or someone isn't a student here, they know where to go. But if you are a current student here, we're more than happy to help walk you through this process. If you go to our website, there's a link for an intake form that you can fill out, and then we'll make an appointment with you. And we're located in the student services building, and you have our contact information there. So please feel free to reach out if you start this process and get stuck, or if you just say I'm overwhelmed, we can help you point you in the right direction. So there are a couple questions in the chat. David, did you have anything else to share before we get to questions?
No, not really.
Okay. Let me see what the questions are. They're from you. They're comments. So you said you didn't have a lawyer. Awesome. Trans Chicago through the Puerto Rican Cultural Center helps with name changes for free. That's good to know. Make a note of that. Does anyone else have questions? Mm-hmm.
For attending this one, you know, you able to talk to people out there and probably there.
Yeah. So the question for those of you online is if Student Legal Services can help people fill out the form. Yeah. We currently aren't representing people in their court case, but we can definitely help advise, fill out forms, walk you through the filing process, tell you what to expect. So yeah, that's absolutely within what we can do. Anything else? Yeah, I will. If you registered for the Zoom, I think we should have your email. And then if you just want to sign in, I can make sure I'll email this out to everybody. And this is being recorded, and the presentation might go up on a website or be available. But yeah.
I think we can all focus on the Zoom
Yeah, on the GSC website, if you wanted to share this presentation. Are you going to post the PowerPoint too with the links? That'd be great. Yeah, so yeah, it'll be posted online. All right, well, if there aren't any other questions, I just want to really thank David for being here to share this story. I think it really helps to hear from someone who's been through it instead of just me, a talking head, talking about filling out forms. And, thanks for sharing that it is possible that, you can do this. And, and that was 5 years ago. And I think things are steadily getting easier. And next year, this new law will go into effect. One thing that law does too is makes it easier for judges to waive that publication. So hopefully this whole process will even get easier as time goes on. And there's lots of resources to help. So thanks everyone for being here.
The only thing I wanted to say was just that if only, I mean, it was easy 5 years ago, but if all this stuff that they have now, they had 5 years ago, I think it would have been a piece of cake. Because I had a couple obstacles, because something that I just remembered was that in my documents, I saw that I had to pay a ticket. I had 2 tickets that I had to pay for. There was I remember there was some type of obstacle where I couldn't do something legally because I had something against me or whatever. So
Mhm.
I don't know if it's still like that and that they count tickets against you, but that was something that I had to pay for on the spot, or else I couldn't keep going in the process.
Gotcha. Yeah, that might be, yeah, they might look up cases that are open. So like, yeah, it could be a traffic ticket. It might not stop you, but yeah, it might hold you up. But yeah, that's good to know. Like, I don't think that that should be a bar, long term, but yeah, that's where you might consult with us or another attorney about how to handle if you have a stumbling block like that. All right. Well, thanks so much, everyone. I appreciate your time and so glad to be here with you. All right. Take care, everyone.